This haunting image is the last known photograph of 12-year-old Jared Negrete, a grainy self-portrait he snapped on the evening of July 19th, 1991, just hours after he had officially been declared missing. That day was supposed to be a milestone for Jared. He was an eager member of the Boy Scouts, and this trip marked a new chapter for him, his first overnight backpacking journey. The destination was no small feat, the summit of Mount San Gorgonio, the tallest peak in Southern California, towering at over 11,000 feet. Jared was joined by 5 fellow scouts and an adult troop leader. Spirits were high as they set out in the crisp morning air, backpacks strapped tight, the trail winding ever upward. For Jared, the challenge was thrilling. At just 12, he was smaller than many of the others, but he was determined to prove himself on this rite of passage. The ascent, however, was grueling. By the time the group had been climbing for nearly 12 hours, exhaustion began to set in. Around 6 p.m., Jared started to struggle. His pace slowed. Each step became harder than the last. The troop leader, focused on reaching camp and keeping the schedule, made a fateful decision. Instead of slowing the group, he chose to push forward with the other scouts, leaving Jared behind, alone on the mountain, with the intention of catching up with him later. It was a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. Not long after Jared was separated, another group of hikers noticed him descending the mountain. What alarmed them was the way he was doing it. He wasn't following the carefully built switchbacks, the zigzagging paths designed to safely navigate the steep incline. Instead, Jared was cutting straight down the slope, a risky maneuver that drastically increased the chance of slipping or losing one's footing. The hikers stopped him and warned him of the dangers. When they later came across the scout troop further up the trail, they relayed their concerns to the leader. But the leader, confident Jared would be fine, brushed it off. He assured them they would reconnect with Jared on their way back. By the time they returned, Jared was gone. As daylight faded into darkness, the troop quickly realized the situation was dire. Jared wasn't anywhere on the trail, nor at camp. Hours passed with no sign of him. By midnight, they descended to the base camp and managed to radio for help. Thus began one of the largest search and rescue missions in Southern California history. Rescue teams poured into the San Gorgonio wilderness, covering more than 130 square miles of rugged mountainous terrain. Helicopters hovered overhead. Dogs were brought in to pick up Jared's scent. And hundreds of trained volunteers scoured every ravine, slope, and dense patch of forest. Days went by with no sign of him. Finally, on the 3rd day, searchers discovered the first clue, a footprint, later confirmed to match the high-top sneakers Jared had been wearing. Hope surged. Near the same area, they found more small traces, candy wrappers, beef jerky packaging, and most chillingly, Jared's disposable camera. When the film was developed, it revealed 12 photos. Most were simple shots of landscapes Jared had taken during the hike. Rolling hills, distant peaks, trees illuminated by fading daylight. But the final frame was different. It was a close-up, shot in the pitch dark, of Jared's own face. His nose and one eye were illuminated by the harsh glare of the camera's flash. Behind him, nothing but blackness. The photograph proved Jared had been alive hours after he was separated, but it offered no answers about where he was or what happened next. The darkness concealed everything that mattered. The search stretched on. In total, 3,000 volunteers and professionals devoted over 45,000 combined hours to combing the wilderness. Every canyon, creek, and ridge was searched again and again. Yet, not a single trace of Jared was ever found beyond those initial items. On August 4th, 1991, after 16 days, the official search was called off. Jared's disappearance remained unsolved. Over the years, several theories have emerged about what might have happened to Jared. He got lost. The simplest explanation is that Jared strayed from the trail, became disoriented, and wandered too far into the wilderness to be found. But this doesn't fully explain the mystery. It was summer, meaning the weather was mild. Jared carried a 2-quart canteen of water, and streams were plentiful throughout the mountain. In theory, he could have survived for days, long enough for search teams to locate him. He fell. Perhaps the most likely scenario is that Jared slipped while shortcutting the switchbacks, tumbling down a steep cliff. In the dark, one wrong step could have been fatal. But this theory raises its own puzzle. Why didn't rescuers ever find his body? Even in rough terrain, such a massive, concentrated search should have turned up some evidence of a fall. A wild animal attack. Mount San Gorgonio is home to black bears and mountain lions. Some believe Jared may have been stalked and taken by a predator. A chilling detail fuels this theory. In Jared's final photo, a faint glowing dot can be seen in the background, which some interpret as the reflection of an animal's eye caught in the flash. But no blood, torn clothing, or drag marks were ever discovered, making this theory less convincing. Abduction. The most unsettling possibility is that Jared wasn't lost at all, that he was abducted. This would explain why no trace of him was ever found, despite the exhaustive search. If someone took him off the mountain, intentionally or otherwise, it would account for the complete absence of remains or belongings. Over 33 years later, Jared Negrete's disappearance is still a mystery. His final photograph, a haunting flashlit close-up in total darkness, remains both proof of life and a symbol of unanswered questions. On the morning of June 15, 1989, in the quiet coastal town of Port St. Joe, Florida, an ordinary stop at a convenience store turned into the beginning of a chilling mystery. As a woman exited the store and walked across the parking lot, something unusual caught her eye, a Polaroid photograph lying face down on the asphalt. At first, she didn't think much of it. Polaroid pictures were common enough at the time, often lost or discarded casually. Out of curiosity, however, she picked it up, turned it over, and instantly froze. The image staring back at her was one she would never forget. Inside the photo, a young girl, likely in her late teens, and a small boy, perhaps no older than 9, lay in the back of a white windowless van. Both of them had duct tape across their mouths, and their hands appeared to be bound behind their backs. The expressions in their eyes radiated fear. The setting looked cramped, suffocating, and terrifyingly real. Shaken, the woman immediately contacted the police. What disturbed her even more was the memory that only minutes earlier, she had seen a van that looked eerily similar to the one in the photo parked in that very lot. She even recalled glimpsing its driver, and her description was vivid enough for investigators to put together a sketch of a suspect. A perimeter was quickly established in the area, and officers scrambled to locate the mysterious vehicle. But the van, its driver, and any trace of the children had already vanished without a trace. What no one realized in that moment was that this photograph would soon connect to a case over 1,500 miles away. A case already haunting another family. Nearly 9 months before the photograph surfaced, 19-year-old Tara Calico, a bright and athletic college student, had gone missing in her hometown of Belen, New Mexico. It was the morning of September 20th, 1988, when Tara set out on her routine bike ride along New Mexico Highway 47. She was a creature of habit. Every morning, she pedaled the same route, from her home to a set of railroad tracks, where she would turn back and return home. That day, however, she had plans with her boyfriend later in the afternoon. To make sure she wasn't late, she told her mother, Patty Dole, to come pick her up if she wasn't home by noon. Patty never got the chance. By midday, when Tara hadn't returned, Patty grew anxious. She drove along Highway 47, tracing Tara's usual path, expecting to see her daughter pedaling back home. But after circling the route multiple times, Tara was nowhere in sight. Fearing something was wrong, Patty called the police to report her daughter missing. A search began almost immediately. Before long, investigators found their first clues. On the side of the highway lay a cassette tape that Tara had likely been listening to during her ride. Nearby were tire tracks, consistent with those of her bicycle, but there was no sign of Tara herself, or of her neon pink bike. As the search radius expanded, another discovery surfaced, a broken fragment of Tara's yellow Walkman cassette player, miles away from where she should have been. To Patty, this was more than just a lost item. She believed Tara had deliberately left it behind as a trail, a desperate attempt to signal she had been taken. Witness statements soon painted an even darker picture. Several people reported seeing an old, battered pickup truck following Tara closely along the highway around 11:30 a.m. Witnesses noted that Tara, wearing headphones, appeared unaware of the truck trailing her. The image that formed was unsettling. Tara, vulnerable on her bicycle, shadowed by a menacing vehicle. Then came the discovery in Florida. When the Polaroid photo from Port St. Joe began circulating, Patty Dole's heart nearly stopped. The young woman in the image bore a haunting resemblance to her missing daughter. Not only did the girl in the photo look strikingly like Tara, but in the picture, a paperback book was visible lying next to her. It was by one of Tara's favorite authors. To Patty, this wasn't just coincidence, this was confirmation. And she wasn't the only one who thought so. Another New Mexico family stepped forward, claiming the boy in the photo was their missing son, 9-year-old Michael Henley, who had vanished in April 1988 during a hunting trip with his father. If true, the photo showed not only Tara, but also another child victim, connecting two tragedies across states. But the investigation soon took a cruel turn. In June 1990, Michael Henley's remains were discovered just 7 miles from the campsite where he had disappeared. Evidence suggested he had not been abducted at all. He had likely gotten lost in the wilderness and died of exposure. This shocking revelation cast doubt on the photograph's connection to Tara. If Michael hadn't been kidnapped, who was the boy in the Polaroid? And if the boy wasn't Michael, could the girl truly be Tara? Experts disagreed. Some investigators insisted the facial features in the photograph matched Tara's beyond reasonable doubt. Others pointed out inconsistencies in facial structure, dismissing the resemblance. The photo's origin, its subjects, and its connection to Tara became a mystery in itself. For decades, Tara's disappearance remained one of New Mexico's most haunting cold cases. Theories abounded. Some believed she had been abducted by a stranger in that truck. Others suggested a more sinister cover-up. One widely discussed theory emerged. Tara may have been accidentally struck by a group of teenagers while biking that day. Fearing the consequences, the group allegedly abducted her, possibly leading to her death. According to whispers in the community, one of those teenagers may have been the son of a local sheriff, sparking rumors of a deliberate cover-up that buried the truth for decades. Then, more than 3 decades later, there was finally movement. On June 13, 2023, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office announced a major update. At this time, law enforcement believes there is sufficient evidence to submit this investigation to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential charges. Currently, the identities and specifics of the persons of interest are sealed by the court and will remain so until a court order otherwise. In other words, the case had been cracked. After 37 years, investigators finally had enough evidence to pursue justice. The details, however, remain sealed. If law enforcement's theory about Tara's tragic fate proves true, then one haunting question remains. Who were the children in that Polaroid photograph? If the girl wasn't Tara and the boy wasn't Michael, then who were they? Were they ever identified? Or do they represent yet another unsolved abduction case that has gone unnoticed all these years? Decades later, the mystery persists. 2 tragedies entwined, one perhaps on the brink of resolution, the other locked forever in a single photograph. The disappearance and murder of Matthew Chase. On the night of June 8, 1988 in Los Angeles, 22-year-old Matthew Chase lived out what seemed at first to be an ordinary evening, one that would soon turn into a tragic mystery captured forever in the grainy snapshot of an ATM camera. Matt, described by those who knew him as kind-hearted, easygoing, and ambitious, spent much of that Wednesday working his regular shift. Later, he joined his close friend and roommate, Teresa Dahl, for dinner. The two returned home around 11:45 p.m., chatting casually about their day as they stepped back into their apartment. It was then that Matt noticed something important: his paycheck, still sitting on the coffee table. He had received it earlier, but hadn't deposited it yet. His funds were running dangerously low, and while he could have waited until morning, the deposit wouldn't have cleared until the following day. For Matt, the solution was simple. He would walk to the ATM just 2 blocks away and deposit it immediately. Teresa, however, was concerned. It was late, nearly midnight, and though the ATM wasn't far, the streets felt unsafe at that hour. She insisted that Matt take her car instead of walking. Before he left, she also asked him to pick up a bag of cat food from the small convenience store across the street from the ATM. The errand was small, the trip quick. It shouldn't have taken more than 15 minutes. But Matt never came home. As the minutes ticked into an hour, Teresa grew uneasy. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m. Yet there was still no sign of Matt. She tried not to panic. Perhaps, she thought, he had gone for a late-night drive to clear his head. Matt sometimes did that. Clinging to this hope, she went to bed, expecting him to be back by morning. But when she awoke at dawn, the apartment was silent. Matt's bed was untouched. His absence was undeniable. Alarmed, Teresa immediately called her brother, Steve Dahl, who was also a close friend of Matt's. Together, they contacted police and attempted to file a missing persons report. But, frustratingly, because Matt had been gone for less than 12 hours, officers told them it was too soon to open a formal investigation. Unwilling to wait, Teresa and Steve began investigating on their own. Steve placed a call to Matt's bank, pretending to be Matt, and what he learned sent chills down both of their spines. According to the bank, Matt had attempted several ATM withdrawals after leaving the apartment. One of those attempts was for $280, a puzzling detail for two reasons. First, Matt's card had a strict daily withdrawal limit far below that amount. Second, Matt's account contained less than $100. He knew this well, which was why he had gone out to deposit his paycheck in the first place. Why then would he attempt impossible withdrawals unless someone else was forcing him at gunpoint? With this new information, Teresa and Steve called the police again. This time, the authorities took the situation far more seriously. Unlike most ATMs in 1988, which lacked surveillance cameras, one of the machines Matt used was equipped with a functioning camera. Investigators developed the film, revealing a haunting image. Matt standing at the ATM with a tall, shadowy man looming directly behind him. Though the image was grainy, the presence of the man was unmistakable. Police quickly created 2 composite sketches of the suspect and circulated them, yet no one came forward to identify him. Meanwhile, whoever had Matt's ATM card continued to use it. A day and a half after Matt vanished, another withdrawal was made. This time, Matt's paycheck had cleared, and the machine dispensed $400. Investigators froze the card after this transaction, ensuring that when it was used again, the ATM confiscated it. But when they tested the card for fingerprints, they found it completely wiped clean. Weeks passed. Then, on June 27, 1988, nearly 3 weeks after Matt's disappearance, police made another discovery. Teresa's car, the one Matt had been driving that night. Shockingly, it was parked just blocks from the very ATM that captured the chilling photograph. The fact that it hadn't been found earlier suggested the car wasn't left there on the night of Matt's abduction, but was instead abandoned there later, possibly by his killer. Like the ATM card, the vehicle was wiped clean of prints. However, investigators did find one curious piece of evidence: a blue bandana in the back seat, with the letters ESPBSCS scrawled on it. ESPBS was quickly identified as standing for the East Side Playboys, a violent local gang operating in the area. The letters CS were never fully decoded. The gang connection gave investigators a potential lead, but there was no direct evidence tying the suspect to the group. And despite the sketch, the photo, and the gang clue, the case stalled. On September the 17th, 1988, 3 months after Matt's disappearance, hikers in Pasadena made a grisly discovery. Floating in a ravine was the decomposed body of a young man. It was Matt. The autopsy revealed a gunshot wound to his head. Based on decomposition, he had been killed and dumped in the ravine only days after his abduction. For his family and friends, the discovery was devastating, confirming their worst fears. But for investigators, it marked another dead end. The case went cold. For the next 3 decades, Matt's murder haunted his loved ones. Teresa never forgot that night. Steve never stopped searching for answers. Then, in 2018, the LAPD announced a long-awaited breakthrough. After re-examining the case, investigators identified the man behind Matt's murder, 20-year-old David Bear Metza, a gang member affiliated with the East Side Playboys. The revelation came in part through David's girlfriend, who confirmed that the man seen in the ATM photo looming over Matt was indeed Metza. Records also revealed that Metza had been killed himself in a gang-related shootout just 2 days after Matt's disappearance. This solved one piece of the puzzle, but raised even more questions. If Metza died 2 days after killing Matt, then who had moved Teresa's car 3 weeks later and dumped it near the ATM? Did Metza have accomplices? If so, who were they? And why were they never identified? And perhaps most perplexing of all, why would someone kidnap and murder a man for a mere $400 withdrawal? Was Matt targeted at random, or was there something more behind his abduction? Though not every question was answered, the 2018 announcement gave Matt's family and friends something they had waited 30 long years for: closure. They finally knew the name of the man responsible. But the case of Matthew Chase remains a haunting reminder of how fragile an ordinary night can be, and how a single decision to step outside can alter the course of a life forever.